And it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on podcastufo.com. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello, and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host. In just a minute, we have Alejandro Rojas coming up with the UFO updates. And our guest this evening is Sam Maranto. He's a repeat guest. He's been on a number of times. Used to actually help out with the show way back when. And you can actually listen to these old shows and archives if you support the show for only $2 or more a month. If you are supporting the show, thank you. If you cannot, then you can still listen to the whole show live every Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on podcastufo.com or on PSN Radio. And also, if that's not a good night for you, you can listen to the full show on the Dark Matter Digital Network, and that's Thursdays at 10 o'clock to midnight Eastern Standard Time. And Alejandro, how are you? You're back from the south, from Florida.
I am back from Florida.
Yeah, I want to hear how that went. Some of my UFO buddies were there. How was that?
It went great, yeah. It was a lot of fun. I thought the lineup was great. You just mentioned the PSN network. Angel Espino, who started that, lives in Florida, and he's someone I've been working with for years. And he says, I don't know if you've heard this, and I'm very flattered. He says it over and over again. He got inspired even to do podcasting because he was a fan of my show. But I remember back in the day hearing from him. So, but after all of these years of him listening to my UFO show, UFO Think Tank, and then Open Minds, this is the first time I've met him face to face. So that was really cool. But otherwise, great speakers. I mean, Erling Strand from Norway was excellent.
Yes.
That was really cool to hear him and his perspectives on that. And I was able to confirm, if you didn't make it to MUFON, we're going to bring him to the UFO Congress. So he says his schedule should be able to accommodate it, and he is very excited about it. So wait till you see some of the video and cool stuff they have from Norway there.
I can't believe it. Just for the listener that's not aware of this is a scientific study that's been going on for a long time. There's a little outbuilding, separate building with instruments, right?
Yeah, they have a building with a bunch of instruments that they measure this light phenomena that happens in this area called Hesdalen, and they have plenty of videos. In fact, you could go to YouTube and Google the Hesdalen lights, and you're going to find a lot of videos that have been captured. He is a professor, I think, at the University of Oslo, but I know lots of people out of that university have headed up a scientific investigation of these lights. They don't know what they are. And interesting enough, you know, that they think they could be some sort of plasma ball. And Professor Strand does not agree with that. He thinks that they appear at times to be intelligently controlled, which is a very interesting thing. I was shocked by that.
Yes, I think I've heard someone else say that maybe it was him. Does he actually say that in one of the YouTube videos?
I'm not sure. But there is a documentary that actually won I think it won People's Choice or Best Full-Length Documentary at the UFO Congress just a few years ago on this case. A couple of people from Norway, they actually came out to the UFO Congress from Norway to accept their award and to show their documentary. But there is a great documentary out there, and they do have a version in English on the Hesdalen lights.
Yeah. That's another one of these areas. But to hear, someone like him who's been studying it think that they're intelligently controlled, that is pretty exciting. Because I know that, like, for instance, Brown Mountain, there's a lot of copper deposits in the ground there, around there, and a lot of people are suggesting that somehow that has to do with, some type of reaction, natural phenomena. And I was wondering about where the Hessland Lights are, if there's any type of deposits of any type of minerals or metals or anything like that. That's one of the questions I would ask.
People can look in the analysis, and that has been done. The geography of the area, the geology of the area has all been looked into as to part of the mystery. Although I think some people argue that the geology, although there are some things that are different out there that could be causing it, I don't know that anybody's seen that it's particularly, unique, that it has features that you can't find other places that don't have this phenomena happening.
That's pretty exciting. What about Ben, Moss, and Tony? I was very excited to hear they were talking mostly about the Socorro incident, weren't they?
Yeah, that was really interesting, especially for people. Well, it was interesting. I was going to say that was really interesting, especially for people who don't know about that case. But it is actually very interesting for people who do know about the case, such as myself also, because I got to learn about more witnesses. There were a lot more witnesses than I knew. I got to see the analysis on, some of the things that people thought it could be and why it was not. More pictures that I've ever seen of, Lonnie Zamora, the person who witnessed that UFO, and a great video with Ray
Stanford. Oh.
Yeah, Stanford.
Yep.
And it's, talking about his research into this. He's the guy who's researched it the most, for many, many years. And so it was really cool to see him talking about it and to see pictures and a video of him and talking with Hynek as a very young man about the investigation. So some really cool stuff. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I would like to see that myself. I really would. And Ray is a dedicated listener to this show, so he's listening right now. I'm sure of it.
Great.
So, yeah. Little shout out to you, Ray.
The other talks, and they were all good. I don't think there was a bad talk at all. A lot of them were really fun, but I wanted to highlight some of the unique ones that we haven't heard before. And I had Bill Schroeder on my show recently. MUFON Man, he goes by, a retired police officer who had an incredible sighting, and he hadn't spoken, at a UFO conference before, but he did great. He was really interesting. He had a phenomenal case, a sighting he had while he was in the military that he spoke about. And it was and he was just great. He's a very likable person. And it was just one of those great things to see someone with, the background he has talking about his investigations into the topic. But he was really good, too. But everybody was really good. I thought it was great. Some people have commented that there was a low turnout. I saw somebody online say something like that. I didn't notice that. I go to MUFON conferences every single year. I think I've only missed one, the one in Kentucky maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And they've all had similar turnouts. I think California, Irvine always does a little better. And otherwise, they're all about the same. And this one was not the least attended that I've seen. So it was, it had a good turnout. At the dinner, there was a big, the room was full. So it was really fun. And just the number of people is great. We were talking about Erling Strand. He's actually what they've done out at the Hessland Lights with all of these cameras and everything. That group UFO Data is trying to reproduce and put more units around, and Erling is part of that group. But it was interesting. They had at least kind of a couple socials or gatherings where people from UFO Data, Mark from who's got the UFO Tog project going on, and Bill Schroeder and Morgan Bell from Florida MUFON, they have their own night sky observation kind of project that they've been doing as well. So they all got together to kind of share what they were doing. The idea was them to hopefully network and share ideas and work together. I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know that in these meetings at least I learned anything that I didn't know before, but that's that's not necessarily fair because I've interviewed all of these guys, whereas others haven't. Mm-hmm. But it was really cool that they actually all got to be together and discuss their projects. So that was another important thing that happened out there.
Yeah, I'm actually glad to hear that happen because I've actually been advocating that they talk. So it sounds like perhaps a first step, or maybe they have even gone beyond that. That's excellent.
Yeah, at least a first step. And then I also got to go to Epcot, where I got to participate in a mission to Mars.
Oh, really?
Yeah, things went a little haywire. We were on a rocket. There was some sort of telemetry that went wrong, so we kind of had to crash land on Mars. But Gary Sinise was our at the Capcom, guiding us through everything, and we made it.
You made it. Awesome. How is the Red Planet these days?
It looks good. Looks good. There's a base out there, and when we arrived and finally landed safely, the personnel at the base were really excited.
Did you happen to see Schwarzenegger?
Schwarzenegger was not there.
I just wanted to hear you imitate him. That's why I brought that up. Wow. Oh, that's good. Great. So what?
Did you ask to Mars?
So what else is going on? Anything happening for sightings or anything like that?
That's really the best news out there. No, There are some things going on. There is an interesting UFO video from August 19th, 2016 that we just posted yesterday from Portland, Oregon. Of course, this is another Roger Marsh story from the MUFON files. Mm-hmm. What's interesting about this is you do see some lights in the sky. It starts off with a couple lights in the sky. And they look to be kind of flickering, so you're thinking, well, maybe Chinese lanterns, maybe flares. But then another light comes on a little further away, flickers for a while, and then goes out, which is not indicative of a Chinese lantern. That's not so strange for a flare. However, there aren't any military bases in the area, it appears. So there still could be a prosaic answer to this sighting, but it is a little bit odd at first. So at least I haven't seen anybody really crack this case yet. But, that's an interesting one.
Wow. Yeah, a Chinese lantern cannot rise without being on the whole entire time. So for it to just come on, that is interesting. A flare could do that, but you'd see a streak when it was shot up. If someone shot it out of a flare gun or something. Yeah. So cool.
I don't know. There have been divers, with streaking lights on them.
That's right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what it might have been. It didn't look like that either because you see them kind of twisting and turning and things like that. So I'm not quite sure what it is yet, but it's pretty interesting.
So what else is happening?
Yeah, there are a couple of headlines too, and we post those on our front page. Also under articles, you can go see the daily UFO headlines. But just a couple bigger stories that are out there that we don't necessarily have stories from. But the biggest being SETI having gotten a signal recently that was a strong signal. And it seems like more of the media is saying it possibly could have been alien as opposed to SETI itself. In fact, Shostak says Shostak posted a video on why he doesn't think it's aliens, but that's creating kind of a buzz out there too.
I bet. So this happened back in April, I think, 2015, if I recall. And the Russians and I'm trying to think who else were involved and kind of didn't really talk about it until recently. So I'm sure there's a little bit of buzz about that as well.
Yeah. So everybo's posting about that. It's really all over the place.
Yeah, if I remember right, it's 96 light years away, and they know that there is a planet around that sun, but they're not. They think it's more like a Mercury-type planet or something like that. No Earth-like planet found. But
Shostak is obviously pretty. I think he's a little peeved that people are running with this, calling it an alien signal.
Yeah. Well, I think the reason, or part of the reason, is anytime someone keeps something quiet for a while and then it comes out, the conspiracy theorists kind of go after something like that.
And it's more fun to put in your headline aliens. You're going to get some more clicks if you put that in there.
Slightly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, you said there was a couple things. Anything else?
Let me see. There are other videos. I mean, interesting enough, there have been some videos lately. So, for instance, in Wycombe, most of these are kind of in the UK, actually. There was a blue flash that was in the sky. Otherwise, just the news has some other videos out there that luckily are not from Secure Team 10 or what's this other one, Section 51, I think, or from, hoax videos. These are just people who have submitted videos to them. Yeah. And some of them are a bit interesting, but there have been quite a few of those out lately as well, which is pretty cool.
And you can see everything on your website or link to it, so, most of them, right?
Yeah, exactly. All of these you can find at openminds.tv.
Excellent. So thanks so much, Alejandro.
Thank you, my friend.
All right. And glad to have you back safe and sound. And we'll be talking to you next week.
Excellent.
All right. Hang on, everyone. We have a quick music break, and we'll be right back with the one and only Sam Maranto. That clip is by Bruce Rainier, a fan of the show. He lives in Canada. Thank you, Bruce. Sam Maranto, welcome back to the show.
What a pleasure to be back, my friend. And it's nice hearing Alejandro's voice. And did we not have one heck of a great time at the conference? Oh, my gosh.
That was really a blast. It was so great hanging with you and Julie. We just had such a good time. And by the way, if you haven't heard Sam Maranto on the show before and you're new to us, Sam was on we were together for a little while helping out with the show. And I consider Sam one of my good friends and really a pleasure to always talk to you, Sam.
Well, it's the same goes this way here. But I tell you what, it was a perfect marriage as far as talents and abilities with you and Alejandro. And I want to thank you very much for starting out with you in those early days. We did have a good time. But I know where talents really seem to work together, and you guys just gel perfectly.
Gel, that's a good word.
Yes. Yeah.
So for the listener out there, again, who is new, who hasn't heard you before, I know a number of people, there's a few in the chat room that have heard you on a few times, but can you kind of go into who you are and I know you had a sighting, I think, when you were 9 years old or something. You're very young, I believe. But anyway, can you kind of go into all that stuff for the new listener?
Sure. My ufology found me. I didn't find it. I had my first experience in 1959 when I was a child, probably about, I'm 61 years old. My birthday's coming up on the 14th of September. So I was a young guy out there at my uncle's cottage exploring while he was working on his new cottage, and he had just dug a well that day. They were out there digging the well, and of course I had to find out how deep it was, so I'm dropping all sorts of stuff down there, and he goes and he says, "Get away from there, don't go drop anything down." So I go in the back, and there is a canal that connects to a lake. This would be in the Fox Lake area in McHenry, Fox Lake area up north in Illinois. So I'm out there and I'm pitching, skipping rocks across the canal over there, or channel, and all of a sudden there was this brilliant orb of light comes flying across my right shoulder, goes over a fence, and goes in back of a willow and shoots back up into the clouds. And it became very strange because my body was really hot at that point. It frightened the heck out of me, and I was very warm. And before I knew it, time lapsed extremely quick. My aunt was looking for me, and it was dark out. And she says, "Where were you? Where were you hiding? What were you doing back here? Why were you hiding from me?" I go, "I was here all this time." And apparently something transpired because it scared the bejesus out of me. I jumped into the car. We went back home. We got into the house. I crawled right in bed, and my mom goes and says, "Aren't you going to watch Leave It?" Well, it wasn't Leave It to Beaver. It was Dennis the Menace. And I always watched it. I go, "Nope, I don't want to watch it." So that was an experience that I had, and I had a few other experiences with entities soon thereafter, and that was something I didn't even want to talk about for years. So that was the first thing. Then my dad had an interest in this subject, and he got interested in it one day by going to he was a music teacher, so he went to the house and was teaching piano to this one boy and his father, who were amateur astronomers. Were outside. They're looking at some objects in the sky. He gets to the door, rings the doorbell. The wife goes and says, "Oh, hurry up, go outside. They're looking at some things in the sky." He goes back there, and they go, "Yeah, we just seen a bunch of UFOs." My dad goes, "What are UFOs?" Yeah. And they go in the house, and they gave him a book. And before you know it, that book and the magazine are sitting on the table the next morning. And that was, little they know, they gave me the adventure of a lifetime. That's what really got me started. And I gave my first presentation on the subject of UFOs, I think, in 1966 or 67. And probably to every single class that I was in into high school, I probably gave a presentation. So it was a subject that it just took me, heart and soul. I mean, it just grabbed me. And the scientific aspect is where I really am interested in heading, and of course, the mass sightings.
Right. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Now, so what was it? I had a friend when we were like, I don't know, early teens, and the subject came up one day, and we both thought it was really cool, and but I don't remember much else about that. So when you were going through school and you did your presentation and a couple of times, were you ridiculed at all or teased? Any like classmates give you a hard time about that?
Well, I was so used to it because I was a nice little plump Italian boy, so I was used to be getting teased or ridiculed and sarcasm and all sorts of stuff. It fell in line, and to me it was just like water on a duck. It didn't matter. I had an interest, but then there was enough people in the group. Anytime he gave a presentation, to this day it doesn't matter. I really enjoy a serious confrontation of a meeting in the minds when it comes to this matter, so I don't care about that. But there's enough people in a group, even as children, that warrant bringing this information out, because they're just yearning for this information.
All right. Well, let me just play this at you, basically, and that is all right. I just meet you. You got off the stage talking about UFOs, and I'm going to say to you, there's nothing to UFOs. What can you possibly prove?
Proof, the thing is, me and proof, that's one word I don't really like because science doesn't really ask for proof. Alcohol and math does. So, but I can tell you about evidence. And, we have Ted Phillips with some 3,000 plus cases of physical trace evidence. We have radar data and pretty much anything that science would use as far as any sort of sensorial type of instrumentation. We've established something is there. And that is the most important thing from a scientific perspective, is that science is best when it's out looking and weighing the evidence on phenomena, not cutting the same frog over and over again. We've done that. We know what the inside of certain things look like. Let's explore the phenomena that are out there. And this is what science is about.
Science is also, especially when it comes to astronomy, is observational for the most part. For just going along those lines, there's people totally convinced there's dark matter and dark energy out there, but there's no proof of that as well. But I think it's kind of interesting that there's so many people that just think it's the UFO phenomena is bogus, no matter what they hear, or no matter who has witnessed one.
True. How many times we hear? In fact, this morning, I don't know if you got my email. 2 questions came in that I thought they are brilliant questions.
Yeah, I'll pose those. Why don't we just go into that right now?
If you don't mind, please.
Yeah. Hang on. So, by the way, any listener to the show, you are welcome to send me an email at martin@podcastufo.com if you have any questions for the guests. And a lot of times a question could be generic. So if it's not geared to a guest, it can be just geared to any guest, and I'd be glad to ask. So here is one of the questions right here. As most of the population carries smartphone technology, and with the use of social media, if a mass sighting occurred in present day, do you think the government would still be able to use tactics to discredit any coverage of the incident? I'll ask that one in the second question later.
Well, the thing here is, as we know, how many times we keep hearing, well, you have these cell phones out there, and where is this evidence? Well, it doesn't matter how much evidence there is. The bottom line is, I can assure you, there is a program or programs in place to basically circumvent, obfuscate to some degree, or detract any value of it at any time. And this has been thought out to the 10th degree, and you could be rest assured of that. So it doesn't matter if they land on the White House lawn, because what it's going to be is probably the first thing is that they're going to say it's a beer commercial or some sort of terrorist act. And then before you know it, they're bombing some country that has a resource that we may need. Something will happen, and I can assure you this is the type of programs that they have in place. And they've thought this out for years. I'll give you a quick example. When Jim Mars was doing his research on the Aurora crash back in 1897, and by the way, that crash was the absolute end all of the great airship episode during that period of time of 1898, 97. That was the last period, the last time it was actually published, anything was published, of the 1,500 articles in newspapers around the United States. And I had asked him, I says, well, what was the most interesting thing that when you were doing this research, what was the most interesting thing that you discovered? He says, Sam, did you know that there were people there within a relatively short period of time telling people to go home, picking up the pieces of the craft and carrying it away? And I says, you mean to tell me that in a short period of time, people from outside the community were there, which obviously means a protocol was in place in 1897? He says, Sam, yes. And I go, well, who on earth could that be? And he goes, that's the question. who is orchestrating that. So, I mean, we have these events that go on, and some things that go outside the scope of. Right now, I'm doing some research for a presentation I'm going to give on Fatima, which was October 13th in 1917, which was a mass sighting of an unidentified aerial phenomena, of course, which got scooped up into the religious realm. And there may be some component to that, I don't know, but it depends on what your definition is. And from the new revelations that came forth in the last, say, 20 years, there's been a lot of information there that wasn't revealed. And I think we have tons and tons of accounts like this where people have scurried off evidence, have told the witnesses to shut up or nothing happened, or if they were very active, vocal, and known, basically tell them, be quiet or just shut them up some way or another.
Wow. So can you go into that case a little bit more? I'm just not familiar with it.
The Fatima case?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, it was for a period of 6 months. On the 13th of the month, every month, there was a appearance of this small being, approximately 3 feet tall, and this being appeared to be female. The drawings of which are actually archived and are now available, and there are 3 very good books. A number of researchers have been out there looking at this, and the funny thing is it was all in Portuguese up until, I believe it was about 2006 when it was translated. And the fact that that's one person I would recommend having on your show is the person who did the translation, and I'll get that information to you. Very interesting story. I have a background in theology because I went to a seminary, so I knew about the case. And, of course, what was echoed is the religious correlation of this being the sighting of these children seeing the Blessed Virgin. And this happened in Portugal, and, of course, during the First World War. The background as far as the social environment was being torn apart by social unrest. There was the socialist and the fascist parties, each of them having their own directives. The women in the community were very strictly governed as far as what they can do and cannot do. It was very strict. They couldn't read. They couldn't go to school. And the social structure was very rigid and hard. And the German invasions into the colonies in Africa were taking place. So they were spending money overseas. The government was having problems. And, of course, with the rise of communism, we had that taking place. And, of course, the church was very concerned about losing volumes of course, their converts in the Eastern Europe. And with the advent of communism and atheism, there was major concern. So this happened at the right time to be scooped up and used, if not genuinely, at least it fell in to a good political position. Either way, what these children saw, mainly the big sighting, the mass sighting, took place on October the 13th of 2017. So next year it'll be 100 years. And there were approximately 60 to 70,000 people out there. At approximately 1:30, there was a beam of light beaming down from an object that appeared to be pearlescent, silver pearlescent, and within the scope of that very small beam, there was this image of this woman, or female type image, and the characteristics were a short skirt type thing, and some draped, something draped over the arms, and holding an orb in its hand. And nothing was actually spoken, but talked, basically a telepathic scenario. And during this time, There was buzzing in the head like insects. They were hearing insects like buzzing around them, which is commonplace to a lot of close encounter type scenarios with crafts. I had another case in Malibu that was very similar to that. And the thing is, there were people out there standing in the rain. You know, we're talking tens of thousands of people. And in an instance, this object comes down, which they thought was the sun, and is referred to as the miracle of the sun. In fact, this is a very huge thing for Portugal. It is probably one of the biggest tourist attractions, religious tourist attractions, and I sure would love to go there one of these days. And people had experienced miracles when this event took place. Within the scope of approximately 200 meters, they were miraculously healed from various diseases, etc. But this disc object came down and became translucent, and they were able to see three beings actually inside of it, and the object actually veered off over the crowd. There's a photo of it you could see on the internet, and
not a real photo of it, is there?
Oh yes,
yeah, there was an from 1917.
1917.
Ah,
yeah, the real photo, and when this took place, there was a tremendous amount of heat. There was discoloration of everybody in the crowd. It was very bizarre, on and on and on. And the clothes that they were wearing were soaked and immediately dried. The mud in that area turned to dried soil. I mean, it was just a strange, miraculous event that was very commonplace. There are approximately 15 correlations to encounters that we would have today or in the past, throughout history, that fall in line with these unidentified aerial phenomena. Call it whatever you want, be it from wherever they come from. It doesn't matter. This is pretty much the same type of phenomena.
Remind me why there were so many people that saw this? Because
it was 6 months. I think it started in March, I believe was the first month. March, I believe was the first month. And this apparition had told them there was 3 children, and Lucinda, Francesco, and the other cousin, excuse me. And they were told that, to come there each and every month on the 13th at approximately noon. Well, on the 13th of October was the big event where you had all these people, and they had heard about this. The funny thing was, this little apparition and these type of events had gone on in this area before and throughout history. It wasn't something unknown. It was known throughout certain pockets of the community, and especially the more rural areas. But this really took, it really caught on, and the people were showing up. There were cures, miraculous events. So, it is just one heck of an interesting case. And, of course, it's a mass sighting of something unusual.
Now, love
that.
Did they have a movie about that? Not exactly like it?
Sure. It definitely was a movie. And that movie was all geared towards a religious perspective.
Yes, I saw that when I was a kid.
Yeah, back in the 50s. Remember, I think it was 1952 they came out with it.
Well, I saw it when I was, like sometime in the 60s or early 70s, something like that. Yes, and I remembered it was more about, like you said, the religious part of it, like Mary, I believe, was supposed to have shown up or something.
Correct.
Yeah.
And boy, those kids and the photographs, if you take a look at those photographs, look at the expressions on the 2 girls. The one little girl has her hand on the side, and they both have their eyes, they're looking, they were not happy. Because people were saying, oh, you're a liar, doing this. They were given the 3rd degree. They were interrogated. this was a serious event. This was taken very seriously. And because, it had various implications, especially the religious overtones and this big social divide in the community, and this riff. So it was a very significant event. And the other thing was there were messages given to the eldest of the group, and 3 messages, and that had religious overtones too, or could have been interpreted into religious overtones. The third of which was never revealed.
Huh. How about that?
Yep.
Wow. And is there a lot of documentation?
Tons.
And I think you said there were 1,500 articles. Is that what you?
Oh, that was the Great Airship sighting.
Oh, sorry, I confused the two.
Yeah.
So, but at the time, was this worldwide press?
Yes, it was documented throughout the world. It was it became very popular soon thereafter. The war was, of course, front and center. And but what had happened is I think it was 1978. They had a ban on secrecy and censorship. So what they were doing is opening the archives of on all past information. And the one individual who was a Portuguese researcher and historian was doing research on, of all things, women's rights, and within that time period, as far as getting a profile of what they went through during that time period, and went through this case because there were so many women involved. Of course, 2 of the 3 witnesses were 2 female girls, and one of the things portrayed, or this being portrayed to them, was that they were to get knowledge, and they were to read, and they were to learn, and that was against the principles of that time. For that community, they kept the women away from knowledge and treated them, like second-class citizens. So that's how she was able to actually get into this information, and everything else that came out of it was a revelation that she had no idea about, and so many people had no idea about, and many people actually within the religious orders didn't even know about all this information. It was there, but nobody went into it and read the details.
Wow. So, by the way, if you're listening live and you want to pose a question for our guest this evening, Sam Maranto, all you have to do is go to the chat room, and that's on podcastufo.com. It's also on PSN Radio has one as well if you're listening over there. And I will pick up a message on either chat. Also, you are welcome to call in. Anyone is welcome to call in during the show. And that number is 603-967-4030. If you miss that number, it's right on our website, podcastufo.com. During the show, you'll see it. So, Sam, you're into mass sightings. I'm going to ask you this other question here in just a minute, but you're into mass sightings. And the obvious of why mass sightings are so important is the fact that there are so many witnesses. Besides the multiple witnesses, what do you think is so important about mass sightings? Because I know you like to focus on those.
Well, the thing, and you had mentioned before, observation in science, the number one sensorial or sensory component to science is observation. First and last, always. It's very important. Observation is key. And yet, and this is what I find to be so hysterical, astronomers base the volumes of what they do, especially in the past, purely almost on observation. And observation is key for them, but yet for our scope of research, it's nonsense. Mm-hmm. And understandably, within reason, that I could see where they could scoff at certain things, but the bottom line is observation is key. And when you have a large section represented, in a fashion that isn't planned. It's just a spontaneous scenario of people with a cross section of the demographic of your community, giving the same or relatively similar interpretations as far as what they saw. And that's really all you want when you're investigating. What did you see? Give me detail. I don't want you to tell me what you think it is, where it came from, its implications, anything other than give me the details. Give me the size, colors, shapes, distance, motion, those things that are relative to the very first components of an observation, to let us know, first of all, it was there. It wasn't imaginary. Now, when you have multiple witnesses, you have credence. Now, you have things like Tinley Park, Phoenix, where you have video footage, photographic footage, and in some instances, even physical trace evidence. Here you have this unidentified aerial phenomena take place over 30-some thousand people. In 1917, where we only had bi-wing airplanes, nothing more sophisticated than that. It wasn't a drone. It wasn't this, that, or the other. It wasn't a celestial event. We know that. And there's a photograph. And they experienced it. And there was physical trace evidence. It had all the markings of everything necessary to really make a solid case. Now, unfortunately, not every case works out that way. Let's take, for instance, the Val Johnson case with the police officer in 1979 driving along the road up and his car gets hit. Well, Val had no other witnesses than himself, and the other witness to it would only be relative to physical trace evidence. That was it. And, of course, the condition that he was in when the other police officer responded to him. But other than that, he had the physical trace evidence speaking for him. So when the evidence speaks, physical trace evidence in a scenario like that could say a lot, especially when it's been tested as much as his case.
Right, and that car is still intact the way it was in '79, right?
Yes, in fact, one of my investigators just came back. In fact, he's the chief investigator for the Michigan State, and he's our triage director here in Illinois, and Dan Snow. He went up there and took pictures of it, and he went to the very site that Val was at and took and analyzed the site, took a bunch of photographs, and he's very good at analyzing that. Now, I had the privilege of actually meeting and interviewing Val back in 2005, and I have his interview on tape. I don't know if anybody has any on tapes, since the original first couple of years. He kind of went low-key and didn't want to be bothered by this anymore. But, here's a case that it would have been all that much more better if he had at least another couple of witnesses or another witness to at least say, no, this man isn't making this up. This light came at him. It hit the car, and what he thinks may very well, some of this energy actually went through the car. As you remember, the windshield was displaced, both split out and in. And even though it is reproducible in a laboratory, you can reproduce it, you cannot do it simultaneously. So there's volumes of scientific data there. But yet, the value of another observation is really key. It would have been It would have solved so much of the dilemma this man went through. The allegations by Phil Klass that this was some sort of prank. In other words, getting back to the observation, to have another body to add credence, especially an independent one, is great. If you have multiple, that's that much better. Then if you have a mass sighting, and to me 100 people or more, my God. And here you had multiple communities coming out, 30,000, 60,000 people. Wow. Tinley Park, the Tinley Park sighting. We had thousands of witnesses. I mean, it wasn't a small event. So I think this is the value, observation.
Right.
It all starts there. Now, you can take a picture, and people show me pictures. Well, look, I'm going through these photos, and look what I see. Well, that doesn't mean anything. It's interpretive. Nobody there's seen whatever is there. We don't know what that is. It could be a dust particle or whatever. So,
right.
Well,
kind of
observation.
A little back to the last question that the gentleman posed to you. Most people do have, at least in the States and parts of Europe and different areas in the world, most people do have a smartphone with a camera and a video player in their pocket. And the argument you often hear, like when I had, the last time I had Seth Shostak on, or the first time I should say, he mentioned that. He said, everyone has video cameras. Why don't we have a good video of a UFO? And I just wanted to hear what you...
well, and funny thing about it is the really good stuff is faked. It's CGI. Yeah. And CGI, with the advent of CGI, that just created all that much more dilemmas when it comes to analyzing video. In fact, there's some people say, I won't even look at a video because it's probably CGI. There are certain attributes to the genuine phenomena that will display itself in video, in any sort of digital format, that is almost telltale something unusual. And, we hear this, fuzzy photos don't have any value. Well, each and every day, fuzzy photos save lives, and they're called X-rays. And there is attributes, when it comes to that energy, those energy fields, how they affect photons and how they affect the camera renderings. So the thing is, there are other components there, and unfortunately, we are so trained to look at real high, really clean images, and the more exotic it is, the more titillating. That is what we are drawn to. That's because we have such short attention spans.
We sure do.
And I can recall a sighting back on, it was June 20th, 2004, right before all this stuff happened in Tinley Park. It was down in Wilmington, Illinois. 3 kids were standing out and seeing a disc over a field rotating. In fact, the rotation of it, they said it looked like a quarter on edge. And if you were to hit it and watch it spin, exactly like that. And it was over some tree line. They were watching it, and the eldest brother comes along. He had gone to the store to pick up some Pepsi. The 4 of them were out there watching this thing for a few minutes, and instead of observing it until it finally left, they went back to playing video games. Now, you'd say, well, that's the way children are. No, that's the way most people are. Now, mind you, the Tinley Park sightings, these objects were sitting out there for some length of time, and yet when you look, the average observation is approximately 15 minutes. That's because people get bored, and they go back to doing whatever they're doing. That's the average, but not everybody. I remember one gentleman in 2003 saw this huge triangular craft fly over while he went to the porch. They were cleaning the basement. He's standing there looking at it, his jaw dropping, saying, what on earth who would need something that huge? And he's watching this thing traverse across the sky. And his wife calls him and says, hey, get down here. We got to clean the basement. And you know what he does? He leaves, go down there, cleans the basement. He says, I could have kicked myself in the butt for that. But this is what people do. We are so regimented, so trained and conditioned that we forfeit the good common sense to just make the observation. Sit there, observe it. And when you're observing, try to get as much detail as possible. Don't think outlandish things of where it came from, or just get the detail. Watch the characteristics. Get as much detail it can give as far as distance, height, whatever, because this stuff is crucial. And that's really what all that matters when it comes to a case, is compile the data.
Yeah. Going back to the Fatima sighting, anybody can, maybe I'll try to put something up in the show notes, but if anyone wanted to see the pictures of that, all you have to do is Google 1917 Fatima. It's spelled just the way it sounds, Fatima, sighting or apparition or the sun. What did you call it?
Miracle of the Sun.
Miracle of the Sun. Yeah, and you'll see the pictures there. And so I understand in a way what you're talking about. It does baffle me, though. We had someone recently on the show that basically said her mother went to sleep when everyone else was watching this UFO. So I do get that everyone's attention span, especially today, is so short. And it kind of leads me into this question. You sort of answered it already. This is also from the same email. And do you think that people are getting blasé to the potential genuine video evidence as there's so much CGI fake videos out there? And, you know, we sort of answered that already, but I also do want to say that how much of a big deal would most people think it would be if there was a mass sighting? And do you think it would just kind of vanish away in the media like it generally does?
Yes. I'm just thinking what they did here in Tinley Park. I mean, think of Tinley Park or think of the O'Hare sighting was a mass sighting. And they lived in the media for X period of time, and sometimes they get celebrated, you know, like, for instance, the Tinley Park case was celebrated last year by some cheesy stuff, you know, some fluff in the media. But nothing beyond that serious. You know, nothing of a serious tone or say, no, this really did happen. And, you know, they always throw in the extraterrestrial hypotheses and they have to make fun of that and anything else. You know, it doesn't matter. The bottom line is they're always going to try to shuffle it away. And strangely enough, that ridicule factor, that we always have that giggle factor. Even on, we get cases, you know, 90-some% of the cases we get in are just explainable just by reading it and cross-reference it, celestial objects, misidentifications, etc. But every once in a while, when you get something a little more elaborate, the first thing that comes to mind, they're crazy. Maybe they're not. Get the information. But the added feature of video today is so important. Get a picture. Get a picture. The other thing is multiple pictures. Heck, it's a phone. Call somebody. Get somebody out on the porch or wherever they're at. Get another perspective. We could do triangulations. With triangulation, we could tell the size and everything else. We have the technology there. Yeah. We have it there. And that can't be dismissed. It's science. So.
Right. I also think that I've talked to you before about the sighting I had and how the thought of taking a picture never even crossed my mind. And I didn't actually. That was in 2006. It wasn't like a smartphone. I think I had a flip phone and would have taken a terrible picture. But still, I think a lot of times when someone has a sighting, I know that right now I would grab my camera if I saw something, but I don't know if it was the first time I saw something, if I would even think of that, because you're in the moment and you're mesmerized and it's tough. But there are enough people that think to take a picture out there that the reason there's so much going on that's pictured is because people now know how to. All they have to do is look on the internet, and they can see the different sites to report. And so, always interesting. So, you mentioned just a second ago about the O'Hare incident. Did you have, I know you're in that area, you're not too far away from O'Hare, probably an hour drive maybe, something like that?
Right, about an hour.
Yeah. Now, did you have any interest when that was going on? Did you have any investigative work that you did on that yourself?
Yes, I worked under. Well, what happened is first of all, like the origin of cases, like where the case, like it was a Newfork case that came in. Peter Davenport had the case. They were called into him. And Peter Davenport, that was also the same scenario with the Tinley Park case. It did not come to MUFON at the CMS. It went to Peter Davenport, even though it was right in my backyard. It's amazing. But then they contacted, we got contacted here. I was contacted and went to work on it. The O'Hare case, I didn't find out about it until Mark Roniger called me up. And Mark and I are talking because the very day that it happened, I'm on the phone with Dave Marler, and who was the state director at the time, and he was in the process of handing it over to me, and we were going to get together on the weekend. So we were making the arrangements and just basically talking, and Peter Davenport gave him a call, and he goes, I got to get off the phone right away. It's Peter, And sure enough, that was what was going on, and he was explaining to him that there is this case going on, and that Richard Haynes, Dr. Haynes, is going to be the point man on that at NICAP, National Aviation Reporting Center, NARCAP, for aerial phenomena. So he was the point man on it, and there were different people with different disciplines assigned different tasks, and he did a great job putting it together. I was out there. I had a couple people that I interviewed. One person called JH, and if you get a chance to look at the 120-some page technical report at narcap.org, you could see it. I think it's number 10, and you could actually read through it or download the details. And my interview was with this J.H., who was she was a retired teacher, and she came from the East Coast. She had a background as being a reporter. She was a military brat, and her father was a commander of a helicopter air wing in the Navy, knew all the technical terms. She had seen pretty much everything that flew. Her and her friend, who was I believe she was a doctor from Belgium, they were going to the international concourse to pick up a friend who was a pilot coming in from overseas. So on the way down on Mannheim, they seen the object below the ceiling of clouds, which is about, I think it was 6,000 feet of, the ceiling was about 6,000 feet. By the way, we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary, November the 6th.
November 7th.
November 7th, yeah. It was 2006. It was about 4:20 or so in the afternoon.
Right.
And so they're watching this thing. They said it was clearly visible. This thing was there, sitting there. And so they got off, getting to the concourse. There are other people out there. They didn't have to point anything out. They were watching them. And they were videoing them. People were taking photographs. And that's why we were so surprised that we really didn't get our share of video or photographs out of that sighting. The other thing is getting our hands on the security camera footage. So either way, all this stuff, people say, well, that wasn't even photographed. Oh, no, it actually was photographed. The pilot who was at the C-17 gate, C-17, they were going to be pushed back pretty soon. And, one of the, I believe it was the co-pilot had a camera, took some pictures. So there were pictures taken. A few were submitted to Mark Allen over at Above Top Secret. And that's actually how I got the witness, as I'd called him because I read something on the blog, and also noted that she said there were photographs taken, and that a photograph was submitted to Above Top Secret that seemed to be legit. So I looked at it, and the thing is, if we don't have a chain of custody, we don't know who had it, can't examine the camera, etc. Basically, all it is an illustration at that point, but it's a very good illustration. And that is specifically what she said she saw from that concourse looking up, and she said that object was there for some period of time. then it, at a very steep angle, or a very slight angle, had shot up straight through the cloud, nearly straight up, leaving a gaping hole to the blue sky above.
Right.
And if you get a chance to actually look at that, the technical report from the site, and Dr. Haynes did a great job, and everybody else putting it together, you could actually see what it would take to displace that much vapor in an instance. And now that's all science there, and it's very impressive. And though it doesn't state, by analyzing that it's something from out of this world, it would be, by our understanding of conventional technology, a pretty difficult task for anything conventional to do.
Well, that's it for the free part of the show. I thank you for listening. I truly wish that everyone could listen to the full shows. That's why I make it totally affordable, in my estimate anyway, at $2 or more a month to support the show, to listen to the full show and archives. You can listen on any media player. If you want to do that, just go to podcastufo.com, and you'll see the support the show right on the menu bar. Just drop down, and it's a one-time sign-up. It takes just a couple of minutes. So anyway, that was Sam Maranto. I want to thank him for being on the show, as well as Alejandro Rojas, helping out with the news, Peggy Shunning for helping with the Facebook page, Carrie Lloyd Whitehouse, and Bruce O'Neill for the music. I don't have next week's guests nailed down yet, so that will be showing up on my website, podcastufo.com, on Sunday. As all Sundays, the guests are up there. You can always email me questions. Doesn't have to be directly for the guest. Could be generic questions, and that's at martin@podcastufo.com. Thanks a lot. I'll be back next week, and remember to keep your eyes to the sky.